Thank you. We have a few extra panel members, starting here with Paula Castiñeira. I pronounced it correctly. She's actually a psychology, so she did a great job in the SONUTS project by teaching us all that we cannot forget the behavior and the behavioral change techniques. So any question on how to motivate people, you can contact her. Alexandre Pinel. Sorry. Yes. Alexandre Pinel is working with Yves Boirie. Yves just left the audience as he has to catch his flight. Then here we have Professor Eva Topinkova from the Charles University in the Czech Republic, who also plays an important role in the SONUTS project. She has a lot of experience with clinical trials, mainly in multimodal interventions and care pathways. And last but definitely not least, I'm proud to pronounce Amalia Tsagari, who is working at the KAT University, but today she represents the European Federation of the Association of Dietitians, the EFAT. And then I would like to open the floor for discussion.
Thank you very much. So everybody has a microphone, right? Okay. Obviously, I thought of many questions, and now I forgot most of them. So I really need your help later on, right? Okay, so think ahead. I'll start with a question I thought I was going to address to Yves. It's not a very easy question, maybe, but he had a slide on the effect of drugs and also a remark on muscle quality. Do you remember that one? Mm-hmm. So I recently met Lisbeth van Rossum, which I respect very much, but the people in the room know that she's a sort of a leading lady in obesity treatment in the Netherlands. And I said, aren't you concerned about the new drugs for obesity and diabetes, because they can be very effective and weight loss can be massive, but that also means a threat to muscle loss, especially in the target group that we are talking about. And the first thing she said, I was a bit... We couldn't have a long conversation, we were doing something else. But she replied, but muscle quality is improving. What is your opinion on this? Because this is going to have a separate life in a sense. If we say, yes, muscle quality is improving, but that doesn't mean that the 7 kilograms of muscle loss is not important, right? How do you address that?
On this point, we have something in the team, because we will try to do something in the literature just to be sure that the muscle quality is improving, especially with weight loss, even if it's for bariatric surgery or caloric restriction. So we need to synthesize the results in the literature to be sure. But yeah, in some way we can find some improvement in functionality after weight loss. And maybe it's linked to the improved quality with lower fat infiltration in the muscle that could explain the improvement on this point. And there are few studies at the moment about the drugs and the effect on the quality of the muscle, because most of the time they are looking at just the weight lost by the patients and not the quality of the body composition. So at the moment we need more results to be sure that the quality is better with the weight loss and with these drugs.
Right. So yes, it is possible. Yes, it is positive in a sense, but how does it weigh against the other negative effects? So that we also have to address, and not just think about muscle quality, because that in a sense is very, very good. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You all listened to Somaya and to her message. And you heard about the whole morning session, starting with a geriatrician, metabolism, dietitian, technology, and you haven't heard the psychology department yet. So this really was a challenging project in that sense, but also an advantage to bring all this together. And someone has to coordinate this, and that was Amsterdam. So I really like to say and thank Josje for coordinating all this, because this has been a huge job and it will still take another job. Could you join me? Okay. Paula, you have been very much concerned with the behavioral change techniques that are behind the application that Somaya has been talking a bit, and Josje will address later this afternoon. Can you give us a few highlights of your findings that are, well, can be clear enough for the audience?
Sure. Well, let me get closer to the microphone. Well, first of all, I am really glad to hear that there are many questions regarding psychological aspects such as behavior change techniques, motivation, even environmental factors. Just so you know, there are specifically behavior change techniques that address those environmental factors, such as stimuli control, restructuring the physical environment. There's an infinite number of behavior change techniques, psychological components, theoretical frameworks that could be easily implemented into lifestyle interventions. Our findings, however, are a little disappointing in terms of we have analyzed a lot of literature addressing lifestyle interventions. We have actually performed a meta-analysis in which we have screened nearly 20,000 articles addressing interventions promoting physical activity. We have included 67 studies in this meta-analysis, and a criteria of inclusion was for these interventions to have at least a psychological component. It is interesting that in these 90 interventions that were recorded in these 67 studies, only 4 of them were delivered by psychologists. So this is very concerning because even when we don't know it, we are applying behavior change techniques. As Doris was saying in her presentation, whenever we conduct a lifestyle intervention, we are promoting a behavior change. And whenever there is a behavior change, psychology is involved, whether we want it or not. So there are 2 ways in which we can do this, and is collaborating with the field, with professionals, and actually making a more transdisciplinary work. Or we can just implement the exercise and dietary interventions without keeping this in mind. And therefore, we are implementing, sometimes not really adequately, these behavior change techniques. So this highlight is that we need more primary studies, as she also found, that make more of an effort to incorporate different disciplines and integrate behavior change techniques. I wish I could give you a magic formula of which behavior change techniques to implement. There is a lot of evidence regarding these basic techniques, such as goal settings, to establish with the client or with the patient adaptive goals and setting them with them. Also, it is important to conduct self-monitoring, feedback, social support. Of course, there are many basic techniques that should be mandatory to implement. However, there are other more complex behavior change techniques that I am sure could enhance further the effectiveness, but are understudied because the primary literature is not really incorporating this field. It is really great news for us that now more projects like SONAT also count with psychologists, and we can blend this work together and incorporate comprehensively psychological components into interventions. So my highlight is to really promote this transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary work. And yeah, that could be it. And of course, encourage you to conduct primary studies, also counting with psychologists.
Does anybody have a question for Paula specifically? But you can imagine we had a lot of crosstalk across Europe, from Madrid to Graz and from Madrid to Amsterdam, especially with the Department of Somaya. It was very, very much interactive, because otherwise you can't design such an application. I'd like to, if there's no specific question, ask Amalia. It's not a research question, but just if there's a part for Paula.
Yeah, I have one question,
okay.
Because I'm using the food trainer from the Exeter University. I was just wondering if you know this app, because I think it's very useful, because it's also kind of playing, and people like to do it. Do you know the app? Because it's about 10 years old and still going on, the research in Exeter.
Could you repeat the name of the app, please?
It's called the Food Trainer.
I don't think I know it.
It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should go on
I will download
with
it for sure.
Food Trainer. Food and then T.
I will keep that in mind, yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. Amalia, you're representing Eva, right? It's not a research question, but one of the things ahead, of course, is how are we going to use it? Well, how are we getting to use this at all? And one of the things you can contribute is, of course, to help through the European network. What do you see as your role in the SONATS project in getting things to the client patient?
I think it's very important for us as dietitians, first of all, to build up our capacity. So for those of you that are actually attending today's session, or that keep a close eye on the results of the SONATS and all those very interesting meta-analysis and reviews, it's very important for us to actually get to know the results of the SONATS. This is why I feel that the FAD can play a role in dissemination of these findings, either through webinars that are free, and we have already delivered one year ago that actually presented the whole concept behind the SONATS project, and we're hoping at least to have one more, so that some of the results of in behavior change or the phenotyping of sarcopenic obesity, or the interventions available and their effectiveness can be presented. And also through the section knowledge transfer of our Compass Nutrition article is a very good way for you to get to know some practical advice from original paper published by the SONATS. So building our capacity is very, very important. But I also feel that it's very important to also have an input of how we can actually contribute, and I hope that that was helpful in that, with practical clinical practice on issues that are relevant to the implementation of either the nutritional interventions or the everyday practice of the dietitian. Okay.
Thank you. In the afternoon, we will talk a bit more about getting things done, in a sense, implementation.
Yeah.
You have an advice for the Dutch to take them with you as a professional?
Yes, as a professional.
Not as an organization.
Well, yes, as a professional, I think it's, despite the fact that currently there are limitations in the available nutritional interventions, when you face a person with sarcopenic obesity, you have to treat him. So personally, I would just use every advice that I heard today. That means a combination of calorie restriction and in combination with resistant training and aerobic training, since it has so many benefits. A take-home message for me is that behavioral change techniques, and Paula actually pointed three techniques, behavioral change techniques, should be a part of our everyday practice, and I think they are, but we should probably give even more emphasis on them and their effectiveness in applying them correctly. And of course, I really am hoping to get to know even more applications that I can use in my everyday practice and in blended care. I don't know whether this is a take-home message for me.
So basically, we should now start doing it.
Yes, blended care is very, very important.
It's not very easy, but we'll talk about it later. Eva, and I always also want to ask others to join in, and also from the audience. Alfonso was talking about the diagnosis. In fact, in order to diagnose, we need criteria, and the criteria are not very obvious or very clear yet. And that's also why I hesitate a bit to call out the prevalence, because prevalence usually depends on the criteria. But my question is, first question is, what should we base the criteria on? Should it be a reference of mortality or long-term physical function, or how should we approach this? It's a very easy question, right?
No. There are basically two things to be distinguished. What the criteria for clinical diagnosis should be. Then we really should follow the screening, diagnosis, and then looking for complications or severity of both. We talking about the sarcopenic obesity, sarcopenia, and obesity. So we basically, for obesity, the criteria we have. However, we know now that sarcopenia is, for example, one of the criterion of malnutrition. That's first thing. Second, the BMI, which used to be and still is in WHO definition of malnutrition, or for overweight, it doesn't work. But we have still this, below 18 BMI as a criterion. And we know now from clinical trials and from evidence that for older people, we probably should set it much higher. For 70 plus, it's 21. And as Alfonso stressed, the best survival is somewhere between 25 and 30. So now, where are we? So what should we use in research then? So I think we should have, and we tried with the EU-GMS and some other American and Asian groups, definitions of sarcopenia. Sarcopenic obesity, Professor Donini has a big group around him, which many of SONAT's people partners are part of. So first we have the definition. We have also some prevalences, and the definition has been, with many discussion, what should be included. So obesity, BMI, we skipped the waist circumference, which originally was there, and then we started and go for the muscle strength, which is more or less partly the muscle function. So we have these criteria, but the development probably, first of all, we need the sarcopenic obesity has already its diagnosis in classification of diseases, sarcopenia as well. So we now have two conditions which already have the diagnosis, but the question is, we really don't have very good research criteria. And if we take into account the muscle strength, for example, so there are big ethnic differences, and there have been a lot of discussion if we should have criteria based on ethnicity, for example, and the Asian consensus may have a different cutoff points. So we have to be aware of it. So these are the very important questions, but my concern actually was when we think about clinical trials, and I'm very happy that Somaya already showed and talked about novel ways how to how to get the evidence. There are also the pragmatic trials, which are not the randomized controlled trials, but the pragmatic, with the real patients we have, because sometimes we call about these are the biased trial, randomized controlled but biased trial, because only patient participants are included which fulfill all the criteria, which are not the real people we really see in clinical practice. So this is really very important to have some evidence from the clinical practice as well, not only from the research trial. And with these patient using and users, not patients, users, some could be quite healthy people. So it's for me what's really is little troublesome that we only intervene very small part of population who is prone to the change already, and that is the way why they want to use the application. And we know that those people are like 5 to maximum 10% of population, but we don't address the rest of the population. And from the public health perspective, these are the people who won't use it, who are probably at the highest risk. So this is not part of the SONATs, but there are really much broader questions and how we should understand and think about the nutritional interventions to cover the most at-risk population, the very selective groups like we will have here in SONATs project. And this is each piece, what I said when Doris starts speaking, that we really need all these pieces of information to put them together, to have a really broader picture and to reach the population in general.
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether everybody knows this, but the current consensus, I think, is just based on the criteria for sarcopenia and the criteria for obesity, which is sort of common sense, but that doesn't mean the sarcopenia criteria exactly the same in an obese person. So that is one of the research questions, in fact, that we have to solve. There is a question? Yes. Great.
Yes. Question for me. I'm not a dietitian, so maybe I said something that's maybe a little stupid. I'm a physiotherapist, but couldn't you use, if you do the BIA assessment of patient, couldn't you use the fat mass and then fat mass versus the fat-free mass, like a proportion to diagnose if someone has sarcopenia obesitas, yes or no? Are you understanding what I mean?
Yeah, there will be several people that are going to answer the question. Yeah. I think
will respond. You are correct, and we are using the percentage of fat mass in the diagnosis of sarcopenic obesity as well.
That's not in flowchart yet, or was it?
No, not in flowchart, but it should be part of it.
No, it's the body composition part, step 2 in the diagnosis.
Yeah. Yes.
Body composition, and this is exactly what you mentioned. So how much fat mass and how much muscle mass in contrast, yeah.
What we haven't shared today, I think, is the sarcopenic obesity prevention index. Is that the final? Because we weren't agreeing on it completely, but I'm just saying it. And this includes muscle mass, muscle strength, and fat percentage. So we like to have a sort of a score which is integrating these parts, and then you can also have to look at it as a sort of continuum, which is probably more interesting than just have one cutoff point and then say, well, that is one, because at the same time, Doris, as a dietitian, knows that all these patients that are coming to her, actually need treatment. So it's not just a very small group that needs something, it's actually a very broad range. And this may help us to also evaluate, because if the one part is actually developing in the positive way and then the other part is in the negative way, we're not getting ahead. But if everything changes in the positive way, then we have a sort of an index of improvement. So using these components that you mentioned. Okay, there's another question.
Yes, thank you. So my question has to do with the fact that from different backgrounds there appears to be a call for more clinical trials, right? So we need to increase the body of evidence. So my background is from rehabilitation medicine. We see the same there. So we are applying lifestyle interventions in different conditions. So one of the challenges we have is thinking of primary outcomes. Because if we want to do this efficiently, in my opinion, it would be wise to have consensus on our primary outcomes. And those could be, for instance, on body composition. It was already touched upon that a clinician might have a different approach, so more on functioning, or in rehabilitation medicine also participation. From the perspective of insurance companies, it might be more on costs. So my question basically to all of you would be, do you agree that it would be wise to have some kind of a consensus? That's one. And second of all, you must have had your own thoughts on that as well, also in the So Nuts project. And to be honest with you, I'm not so familiar with the trial, so I was also curious about the primary focus of that trial.
It's not a clinical trial, so we have been analyzing the literature. Okay. And developing an application. So there's not a clinical trial, but that might be actually. Okay,
but then the next step is probably going to be some sort of a trial, right? So you must have your thoughts on.
Who wants to respond?
I just want. Okay, go. Just want to make an initial comment from the ethics perspective. Obviously, there is the need for us to have simple answers to, but for dietitians, there are always a lot of outcomes. We have outcomes in the signs and symptoms domain, but we also have outcomes in the process domain, how one is actually adhering to our nutritional intervention, to our dietary recommendations. And we also have PREM outcomes, how the patient is actually evaluating the relationship and the counseling sessions, how whether he or she feels that we are helpful. So there are different outcomes, and I don't think that for a dietitian, from point of view, we're actually able to, even for sarcopenic obesity, to just choose one outcome, because we are viewing our intervention in a more holistic way and less in a concrete, just pick up one outcome, either muscle strength or in a combination, let's say, with weight loss, and that's it, we're successful.
But are you also referring to patient-reported outcomes?
Yes, PREM outcomes, patient-reported outcomes.
Maybe I can add something. I think it's very important to have consensus on outcomes, and there are, for other conditions, for example, core outcome sets. And this would also be very helpful to have for sarcopenic obesity, as from the have a look from the researchers' side. So it's very hard to pool studies if everybody measures another outcome, and I totally agree that this would be very important in the future.
And my excuses for not explaining the whole SONETS project, but I thought all the work packages would be a bit boring. But sorry for not explaining.
But maybe continuing on that, what would be your idea? I mean, which concepts should be in such a core data set, in your opinion?
Well, I think I cannot answer this completely, but there have to be consensus in the scientific community, so this has to be a discussion. It is an ongoing discussion, but of course there have to be outcomes that are very diverse, also important for patient-centered outcomes, also functionality, of course, but we also cannot forget the body composition. So I think this is open for discussion, and it would be a longer process to define that, but definitely important.
And definitely the three that I mentioned is fat mass, muscle mass, and muscle function, because otherwise we can't even address the criteria. But there would be more needed. But maybe someone from the audience wants to respond to the same question. If any ideas that we can use? No? There is another question.
Hello?
Hi.
Thank you for that important comment. On that note, I'd like to say we performed a study on, as Doris presented, on the ongoing trials on sarcopenic obesity, or the ongoing studies. And there we did find that the very important outcomes regarding fat mass, and muscle functionality are not being studied simultaneously. So that is a very big problem that we hopefully will need to tackle in future. And we are in the process of publishing a paper on this, where many co-authors from the SONOTS consortium also agree on the recommendation of a core outcome set regarding those three big aspects. The exact parameters that we have to study or that will have to be looked at are still up for debate, but it's definitely, I think, what we can all agree on, as Peter has said and as Doris has mentioned, is muscle mass, fat mass, and muscle functionality. Thank you.
And if I can add something to that, I think that the outcomes, first of all, the nutritional outcomes, ESPEN, Professor Barazzoni, they're working also on some outcomes, but so they hopefully will be published soon. But the question is, first of all, I'm very happy what Lea said, that, and what already you showed, I mean, Doris, that the ongoing studies have very different outcomes. So we are currently not able to find consensus which parameters should be as a minimum requirement in these types of studies. So I think that should be a good forum for the ESPEN or even IFAD would be forum for developing consensus on that. And as I am a geriatrician, I want to give you another example. In the old patient, we really are looking for functioning and independence, as Professor Cruz already mentioned as well. And we define the condition called frailty, which means increased vulnerability of older people, which make them prone to all types of adverse health outcomes. And it took us about 10 years to EMA, which is the European Medicine Agency, evaluating new drugs in clinical trials, to require, incorporate functional measurement, like, not only self-care, but also some functional, even the muscle strength, the performance test, some of these performance tests, like, chair stand, or even some nutritional parameters. The frailty is defined as also with nutritional, one of the criteria is a nutritional weight loss. But so we finally got there, but it took us really 10 years. So new studies with new drugs in older people should include, at least have a recommendation of European Medicine Agency to include these functional status. And the same is with the nutritional studies. We basically, we study that not basically that we don't have so many obese, but we want to have as many healthy people. So it's about health. It's not only about percentage of fat. So we should have in mind so that some of these functional and mortality and health indicators probably should be included as some of these outcomes.
Right. So, and maybe the next question then would be, are we actually going to measure all these things in clinical practice also if we think that is so important? Because we can establish criteria, but if we are not going to measure anything, we might as well just look at the patient, assess the patient, and say, well, what are the next steps to improve your situation? Do we actually, can health, sorry, are healthcare professionals in fact going to measure body composition and hand grip strength on a regular basis in clinical practice? That's a question for you, but you have to think about it and respond, if possible.
I would like to.
We let you respond first.
Yeah, well, I work as a physiotherapist and we work with healthy lifestyle interventions, and they have been approved by the RIVM, so the Dutch Health Board, I would almost say. And so, yes, we work together with dietitians, with nutritionists, we as a physiotherapist, and then we have also a psychologist. So yes, we as a physiotherapist, we measure body composition and strength and everything. So I don't see the problem, I would almost say. We're already doing this.
Well, I love your answer.
But apparently, a lot of people don't know this.
Yeah, that is really my question, because we are a room full of believers in a sense. So if you think about healthcare professionals and maybe you for physiotherapy, what do you think your colleagues will do, just as in a general sense? Will they all be measuring body composition, for instance? Yes?
Yes,
oh,
of course. When you're approved and you have the license to work with in a healthy lifestyle intervention, then that's one of the things you have to do. It's not an option. You're committed to that.
Well, great. Is someone else wants to respond, or another question?
No, I think. Is it working?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I want to respond. I'm a geriatric physical therapist, or at least I used to be. But I don't think that every physical therapist measures or has attention for body composition. I think there must be a lot more attention to these kind of measurements.
Well, it will be a broad range probably, but like in a diagnosis, it might be as simple as measuring blood pressure. Every visit of a doctor, you will measure blood pressure, and you might actually do it, but it's not being done in clinical practice.
If I may,
my idea.
If I may jump in, actually.
You can jump in.
I would like.
I mean, lady wants to respond.
I say one or two introductory words, but then I would like to give floor to Teresa. She didn't expect that, because she did some research based on the data from the SHARE, what the clinical practice is in the Czech Republic. But in general, I am part of the research group of EU-GMS on geriatric rehabilitation. And we starting with, creating standards and looking which countries geriatric rehabilitation is as a specific, conditions provided as a specific area of rehab. But here we did some studies during COVID, and we looked how many, because we know that just nutrition is such an important part of rehabilitation. Patient after COVID, but after stroke, after hip fractures, these are patients who benefit enormously from any nutritional therapy. So we even don't, and in many countries, many facilities or setting, there is not a nutritionist available. Like if available, right? You mentioned already that it would be good if available. So we first have to set some criteria about the availability of these specialists. It's like if you would provide rehabilitation without rehabilitation specialist, physiotherapist, ergotherapist. So we really should set these criteria. And Teresa, please tell what we found from the Czech Republic based on, GPs' practices and general knowledge of the population who may benefit from these services.
Thank you.
Stand up, please.
Hello. I'm a clinical dietitian in Czech Republic, and I did my dissertation on this kind of topic. We somehow try to research in our patient in group, which is 50 years and older, their dietary habits and how they respond to the recommendation nutritional therapists, dietitians, and the results wasn't very positive, actually. We found that very big amount of our patients are very obese. Their dietary habits are very bad, and the connection to dietitian almost doesn't exist. So they were not very positive outcomes from our and it was very large cohort. It was like 2,316 patients in the cohort. And the first thing is to establish the good environment to be able to provide any kind of treatment to the patient. We know that they are obese, they are problematic in many parts of the nutrition and the physiotherapist part. So
I was mainly struck when we were discussing what should be measured and how we could measure. So that they were asked, does your GP ask about your weight?
Yeah.
And did he measure weight in the last year? I mean, almost none,
Well,
so they even don't weigh the patient. So how could we go further to body composition?
Yeah.
And that those people don't know anything about a nutritionist, like 15% new and med nutritionists. So we have to start create awareness. Then we have to go to basic, and then we have research centers, and we as a researcher have make knowledge what to be measured.
In the afternoon, we are going to talk more about the professional and how to operate.
Yeah.
You want to add something? Because otherwise my last question is to Maya.
Just a little comment, if I can. Well, actually, yes, was a problem. Yeah, I'm tried to, ask a very simple question to the GPs if they're measuring their weight, like very basic things, and even those were not answered very correctly. So yes, we have to start even lower than we think, actually. So that's from.
Thank you very much. Somaya, you explained. Well, we were in a project together, and we were cross-domain talking, trying to. Not always very easy, was it?
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. But we are still here together. In your talk, you said most are not going to be very successful. So what is your prediction?
Of this one?
Of this one?
This one is going to be moderately successful because we don't have very deep pockets, and we can be very honest about that. Everyone in this room should be aware that if you want to develop and sustain a digital tool, you need to have money. And we are researchers, and we like to spend money on our researchers. And being a digital researcher means that you even have to have more money, so you can have very good people in your team, and there are many here. I don't know where Michel is because he was in my, yeah, there. But there are a lot of people who needs to be working within your team and looking at the big companies or the startups who made it to scale up. They have investors, etc. So if we will find somebody or an insurance company who's going to adopt our application because it is evidence-based, and the evidence-based is also, when you are talking to insurance companies, is very important these days. So if you are thinking about starting your own company as a dietitian because you're thinking about this great tool, that would be based on evidence. So that would be my answer.
Thank you very much.
Looking at the time.
And at least we've done something right. We have some evidence gathered. And we have the second tour of the afternoon will be on the application, so it might be a bit more clear what it's actually about. For the moment, you want to close off? The panel session is now finished.
Yeah, so please join me in thanking the
Thank
panel
you all.
members. And now it's time to have some nutrition and protein ourselves. So please join us for lunch, and we will be back at 2 o'clock.